Hey folks, how are you doing today? Now, welcome to this webinar where we are going to be talking about podcast launching and how you can launch with really easy setup and to actually get the maximum effects that you can. Now, I'm going to be working through this presentation, which you can see just there. So this is a podcast launch guide. This is a part of your toolkit, your podcasting toolkit, which is a whole series of courses and webinars that are designed to help you develop your podcasting skills. So if you want to check out some more courses, please check out our website. And also here are the upcoming webinars. So we hold a free monthly webinar each month. And as you can see today, we're talking about the podcast launch guide. Next month is going to be all about authors and how authors can make the most of podcasting. Then we've got June 17th, which is going to be a big one. That's going to be the beginner's guide. It's easy for me to say. The beginner's guide to podcasting. Now, this one is going to be how you can engage with podcasting. And so we're not just talking about launching a podcast. We're talking about how you can engage by being a guest, sponsor, supporter, connecting, networking skills, loads of different stuff in that one. And then we're going to be launching a brand new course and webinar on the 15th of July called Keeping Your Podcast Alive and Kicking. So if you've got a podcast already, but you want to find out how you can make the most of it, then that's going to be the webinar to tune in. Following then, we've got Grow Live, which is all about bringing people together through talks, featured podcasts, courses. There's going to be a free 5-day challenge. That's going to be between the 14th and 15th, 14th to 20th of September. You can find out more by visiting our website. We're repeating the beginner's guide because it's a brand new one. We're going to be going back to guest in November and then a podcast launch again in December. So that's what's coming up. Now, you will be able to watch all of these exactly where you're watching it now, either on YouTube or LinkedIn or via StreamYard if you've found us through Eventbrite. And basically, that's what we've got coming up. So let's get cracking with the podcasting launch guide. Now, this webinar is going to be split into two different sections. First section is me talking through different slides, which you can already see if you followed us on LinkedIn. But also, then after the presentation, which will last about half hour, you will get a chance to ask me any questions in the Q&A, which will last for another half hour or until or shorter if there's no questions there. So let's get cracking. By the way, talk about LinkedIn. There is a free newsletter that you can subscribe to if you haven't already on LinkedIn, which you can find on LinkedIn. There's loads of different articles already there. It's called Podcast Ideas by Grow Radio. To check that out as well, you can see the link down the bottom there. Let's get cracking with this because I've got 12 slides that I want to talk to you about in the next 27 minutes. So first of all, I want you to, when you're looking at a podcast, let's talk straight away about the podcast idea. Now, if you're thinking about launching a podcast, please let me know in the comments what you're looking for from this webinar, by the way. And if you have got a podcast already and you just want some different tips, ask me any questions in the comments. Use the comments as a way of giving me information that I can give to you throughout this webinar. So first of all, let's talk about crafting your podcast idea. Now, your podcast idea isn't just the name. It's not just the artwork. This is what your podcast is going to bring to different people. Now, when I say different people, I want you to start thinking about what your podcast idea means to you, your business, and your community. Now, let's break these down a little bit more because they've got to give value to all three places. It's got to give you something yourself. So this could be increased knowledge. This could be networking opportunities. It could be actually developing your skills as a podcaster, computer skills, maybe marketing skills, whatever it is. What is your podcast going to give you? Then think about what your podcast is going to give your business if it's tied into a business. Now, if it is tied into a business, how are you going to link that into your marketing goals, to your marketing plan? We just don't want your podcast to sit on top of everything else because we know when times are tough, in terms of energy, time, resources, cost, whatever it is, those things just on the top, they're going to get scrapped. So what value is your podcast going to give your business? How is it going to be interlinked into your marketing goals? That's what you need to work out at this stage. And lastly, your community. What is your podcast going to give your community? And when I say community, I mean the people who are listening to it. I mean your supporters. I mean the people who are part of it, so your podcasting team. What is your podcast going to give them as listeners? Then work out what your podcast is going to literally be about. So your format, the format, the guests, the content, and all that kind of stuff. Now, why I say it in those orders is because 99% of podcasts fail because their podcast idea isn't strong enough. They've gone straight through to what equipment do I need? How am I going to share it? How am I going to get my first 1,000 listeners? Where actually it's all about giving value to those 3 different places. And if you craft your podcast idea to the extent that actually it is the main thing that you want to focus on, and that is the main point of view that you're looking through it with, what value am I going to give myself, my business, and my community? Then your podcast will be a success because you would have linked it into it all together. You would have worked out that if you're moving house in 3 months' time, what's going to happen to your podcast during that time when you're going to move house? You're going to work out, I'm launching a book and a new website. Is it worth me launching a podcast at the same time? The answer would be no, because you want to make sure that your audiences have one key message at any one point in time. But you've worked all these bits out. So working on your idea is the best time thing you can do to make your podcast a success. Now, there's 5 different types of podcast formats you're available to you. Now, the main one that most people could go down is the interview style, where you get one or more people. It could be 1-to-1 or 1-to-a-few on a panel, but you get one person talking and interviewing different people. But that's only one format that you can choose. There's also solo podcasts where you've got one person talking. You've got the interview, as I've mentioned. You've got the events which follow a different event, and that's only suitable for that particular event. You've got audio dramas. You've also got different ones which are based on series which are just ongoing. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that your podcast format gives value to your audience and is the best format for the type of content you're sharing. Now, if you've got a large network or you want to use a podcast to launch your speaking career, then a mix of solo podcasts and interview podcasts are a great way of doing it. If you're time poor and you just want to blast out loads of episodes, solo podcast is a great way of being able to record in bulk, in batch recording, as we call it. So you can do that. But this is why you've got to think about what your target audience and also what messages you want to share, because doing a solo podcast might not be right for everyone. You might want to do an interview-based podcast. So when I've put this slide in, I want you to think about your podcast format, but I want you to think about it in a way that it's just not one particular format. You can mix and choose it. You can have solo podcast one week. You can have an interview podcast the other week. You can then have if you've got an event which is based in your community that you want to cover, you can cover that. You don't have to be tied to one particular event. So please, when you're picking your podcast format, you can mix and match it. You don't have to keep to the same format every single time. Now, when you're naming your podcast, and I apologize if I'm going through these quite quickly, I've got a lot of stuff to cover, and I want to give you enough time at the end for questions and answers. So when it comes to naming your podcast, you want to make it as simple as possible. You want it to be about 3 to 5 kind of words long. You want any kind of keywords to be in there. And you want to make sure that people will know about it and will be able to remember it and understand what the podcast is from the name. Now, if it's tied to a business, you ideally want a business name, or you want something around the business to be in the name if you can. Not essential, but you do want it to have that link to it so people know that your podcast is around your business. But also, if it's about a community, you want the podcast to be using words or phrases which your community recognizes. So the best, when you come to your name, you can change it after a while if you want to. It's probably not advised to change your name that often, but you can change your name if you want to. but it's really important. But also you can figure out a good name by doing a search on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, Amazon Music also, to see what other podcasts have got your name. Or if you're looking for a certain keyword, to include a certain keyword, you can type that keyword in to see what other podcasts have got that keyword in it. Again, this isn't going to make or break the podcast, but it's going to make it easier for people to find it. But again, I just want, on that point of view, I just want to let you know that most people will find a podcast not through the search on the Apple Podcasts or Spotify, whatever podcast platform they're listening in. They normally find the actual podcast through you sharing it on socials or someone recommending it to them. So with your name, use your keywords. It's good for your SEO as well. But to be fair, you want it to have a link to what you're talking about. That's the main thing. It's not going to make or break the episode, however. Now, what you want to do is once you figured out the name and what type of format, you want to start planning your first 12 episodes. Now, I love planning in 12s. I do 90-day planning, which is obviously 12 weeks. If you're looking at doing a monthly episode, then you've got one a quarter. There's 12 months in a year. So if you're doing a monthly episode, then you can have one a month. You know, it works really, really well. But planning your first 12 episodes means that actually you've got flexibility in terms of where you want to, content you want to share with people. You know the direction of travel. But also, because you've got a plan of 12 episodes, if something goes wrong or a guest doesn't turn up, you know you've got a backup because you've already planned it in. There's an interesting stat that a lot of podcasts fail within the first 6 episodes. Now that stat ranges from 93% to 98%, or whichever study you want to go for. The point is that most podcasts fail because they haven't worked on the idea and they haven't made a plan. So they've started it off with loads of gusto, loads of energy, but it's fizzled out. It's what we call pod fade. By planning your first 12 episodes, you're getting past that point and you're getting to the point where you're into the groove. And also then, once you get into episode 9 or 10, you plan for your next 12 episodes. So it becomes a rolling beast. But you know that you've always got the next 3 months worth of content at least all sorted. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you have to have it recorded, but you need to have a plan. And then, as I said before, if you do have a guest not turn up, or you can't record, or you do move, or you do launch something and you need to delay something, you've got a plan and you know where you want to go because you know what you've got kind of coming up. You have. So to be fair, having a plan for your first 12 episodes, it's a really good idea. And I would recommend anybody, if you've got a podcast already, or if you think about launching a podcast, plan for your first 12. And it can be as simple as having a spreadsheet where you've got the dates and you've got the episode numbers and you've got the subject and who you want to kind of talk to there. It's so cool. Also, when it comes to planning your first 12 episodes, if you've got guests coming onto your show, they're going to probably want a couple of weeks to kind of organize their calendar or book in with you. You might want another week to be able to record and do that. So you can see, actually, you've probably got about 5 or 6 weeks where that from the first initial contact to actually recording and releasing the episode. So if you've got your 12 episodes sorted, you can plan that in. You don't want to be scurrying away looking for a podcast episode to be released a few days beforehand. That's the one thing you don't want to do. If you plan it, you're going to be in a much, much better position, Now, every different platform, there's loads of different artwork you can kind of design for your podcast. And we've gone past now the planning stage. We know what the idea is going to be. We know what format. We know the name. There's a few bits of artwork you need to figure out. The first one is your main profile picture. Now, this is the picture that people will see when they go onto Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever they listen to their podcasts. But this is the main picture. Now, what you want to do is you want to make sure that, first of all, it meets the size of the artwork is normally a square, and you've got to make sure that it meets the requirements of platforms. Now, Most platforms are absolutely fine. Apple Podcasts are a little bit more specific with the podcast. So when you are launching a podcast and you're going through the Apple Podcast Connect platform, you do need to make sure that actually the artwork is suitable. And I would recommend setting up the links a few days beforehand, just in case you need to change the artwork, or maybe a week beforehand. So if you do need to change it and you are in touch with a designer, they've got time to do it, because you do have to have certain specifications. And please, if you do want those specifications, check out the Apple Podcast Connect platform specifications for artwork. Please check that out. Doesn't mean to say it delays it if you've planned it in, but you do need to make sure you are designing it correctly for those requirements. Now, the actual design work is quite simple. If I show you my phone, then you'll be able to see how small the actual artwork is. And that's why I've got it on my phone and not actually on the screen. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm a little bit bigger now. There you go. So now, if I show you my phone, and if I go to Apple Podcasts, you will see that here, that is my library. So this is all the podcasts that I'm subscribed to just on Apple Podcasts at this precise moment. Now, what you can see is, let's say you use this one for example, you can read that writing quite well, or the next big idea you can read quite well, because you've got the large bold letters there. Any small details tend to get lost. So you want to make sure that actually you have got the main little bits, the main information, as strong as kind of small, as large as possible. Any small information might get lost. So that's your main piece of artwork you want to go for. Make sure that any large text which is prominent needs to be there. Any small text will get lost. It'd be useful to have your picture or your logo on there, especially if it's tied to a business or community. Not massively kind of hard to change it if you do ever want to change it, but that's your first little bit. So that is your first main profile picture. Imagine it as your profile picture on your LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram. It's your main profile picture. That's what most people will find out. Secondary picture to that is going to be your episode picture, which is going to be roughly the same as your first one, but it might have the episode number on. It might have the episode name. It might have, if you've got a guest, a picture of their image as well on there. But all of these bits will make the episode unique to that, the episode picture unique to that particular episode. So what you want to do then is, with that particular piece of content, you can then share it with your guests. You can then share it with your supporters, your network, your community as well. And because if you share it with your guest, they're more likely to share your podcast with a picture of their face on, because obviously it's got their face on. It's a good asset for them to share. But you want to make sure that the episode picture is unique to that one there. In reality, you don't have to start with that. You can just start with a profile picture and that will filter through to all the episodes. But I would recommend you to create a separate one for each of the episodes if you can. The next one is going to be a banner picture, which you can see on YouTube and on your other social media platforms if you're there. Now, typically, I'm just going to try to find one for you. So particularly, for instance, just picking a random one there, you've got the banner picture just there, and then you've got all the different shorts and stuff on there, you see. So you want, again, a little banner picture there. Now you can use that on LinkedIn, you can use that on Facebook, you can use that on different platforms, different platforms. You can use that as different bits, but you want a main banner picture there. Now, obviously, that's going to be in the same color guidelines as what you've had the episode and your profile picture, all that kind of stuff. But there are 3 different types of artwork that you can really use for your podcast. Now, a designer can do that quite quickly. If you want to design it yourself, you can use tools like Canva to be able to do that, or Adobe's version of that as well. There's loads of different platforms out there. You can even use AI to be able to do it as well. What you want to do, though, is want to make sure that the colors, the branding is consistent across all the platforms as well. So you don't have a completely different profile image to the episode. And you just want to make sure they all tie in. Next up is equipment. Now, essential equipment for podcasting. Now, the beauty of this is normally the first thing that people say and ask me when they start talking about podcasting. But I was tempted not to put the slide in because honestly, it's not going to make or break your podcast. At the start of it, you want to make it as simple as possible, both for you as a recorder and as a podcaster, and also your guests to come on board with. Now, if you're doing it in person, or if you're doing it online, or if you're doing it on location somewhere else, you're going to need different equipment. So your essential equipment is what you need based on your podcasting type of recording. If you're doing solo casts, a microphone plugged into a laptop might be spot on. If you're doing video, you obviously need a camera to be able to record the visuals as well. If you're on location, so if you're doing it, let's say in a coffee shop or a pub or on location somewhere, you're going to need a couple of mics, or you're going to need a clip-on mic to reduce the background noise, or a dictaphone to be able to do it. Your equipment is really unique to how you're going to be recording it. Hell, if you're doing it online, then you need a laptop or a phone with a decent camera, decent microphone, and that might just be at the start using what you've got at the moment. I'm recording the sound through my laptop at the moment. And if I wanted to improve the sound quality, I could just put a USB mic into here. I personally use the Blue Yeti from Logitech. Great mic. It's the industry standard. Love it. So I'll just pop it in. I've got a whole Rode kit that I could I can plug in if I wanted to. I could put my pod mic into my Rodecaster Pro if I wanted to. But in reality, it's not going to make or break the episode. And this is what we're talking about. We want to make podcasts as simple as possible. So when it comes to the equipment, it really does depend on what you want to do. And it also depends on where you're going to be recording it as well. If you're recording it in a very echoey room, a microphone won't make a massive difference. All the microphone does, by the way, it just reduces the distance between your mouth and the recording device. If you're in a room and your microphone's around quite far away and you've got noise bouncing off loads of hard surfaces, it's still going to sound echoey. So you want to make sure if you're recording a podcast, both the microphone is important, but also the room that you're in is equally as important as well. There's a reason why I'm using the sofa and I've put these here is because it deadens the sound a bit and makes it a little bit warmer. So people ask me this question all the time: what equipment do I need to start a podcast? And my first question is always, where are you going to be recording your podcast, or how are you going to record your podcast? My simple answer is start with the equipment that you've already got, and then you can build over time. The reason I say that is because if you buy £1,000 worth of kit, so you buy the Rodecaster Pro, which is a fantastic piece of kit, with a couple of mics that plug into it that you can plug into your laptop. If you spend £1,000 on that, but you only use it 4 or 5 times because you don't want to do it, or you've run out of time, or your idea is not good enough, then you've spent £1,000 for nothing. You might as well start with your kit that you've got, and then you can build that up slowly. So you can build a mic after 12 episodes or so. Then you might buy a different camera that you can use, and then you might actually go face to face for the next 12. You can just build upon it over time. So the equipment won't make or break your podcast. It will give you more confidence. It might make you feel more of a podcast if you've got a mic, but in reality, you might not be able to see any difference or hear any difference if you've got your equipment set up already there. Now, this is the other thing that people talk about is podcast editing. And the secret to podcast editing is it shouldn't sound like it's been edited. That's the trick. And we've fallen down the issues in the past where actually we've over edited different episodes. And we've done that because that's what we thought would sound best, taking out all the ums and yahs, not realizing that actually it makes a video very, very jumpy and it makes it sound okay, but you lose that human touch. So the trick to podcast editing is it shouldn't sound edited. And I'm actually veering away from taking out most stuff because you want it to sound like a natural conversation. Think about it. The best conversations that you've heard and best podcasts you've probably heard in the past are just 2 people or 3 people just talking and just kind of going back and forth. There's no editing on that. It's just literally the conversations you have beforehand. So that's what you want to do. You want to make sure that the podcast sounds as natural as possible. Editing, it's useful. You might want to put a starting bit of jingle at the start, bit of jingle at the end. If you've got an ad that you want to place in the middle, you can put that in. That's all good. But the actual main interview itself and the main podcast should feel like a natural conversation. I'm talking to you. I've been talking for 24 minutes at this point in time. And if I was editing this, I could edit it into different chunks for sure. But would I edit out any ums, yahs, and that kind of stuff? No, I wouldn't, because I want to keep the flow. I want you to hear me naturally just going through it. And that's what you want your podcast to feel like as well. If it sounds like it's been edited too much. And I know why people do it. I get it. But you don't want it to sound edited. That's why I've put this one in there. Now, you've made the content, you've shared, you've created it. How do you get it on Spotify and the other platforms? What you do is you put it onto a podcast host. Now, a podcast host has one simple job in my mind. It has loads of other stuff it can do, but one simple job. It is that you upload the show into the podcast host, and then that podcast host shares it to all the different places where people listen to it. And in the UK, they listen to it in 3 main different places: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. In the States, in Australia, those different places, they've got different platforms, which is great. And you want to share it into as many different platforms, but you want to get it onto those 3 different platforms as possible. Now, a podcast host means that you don't have to worry about sharing it into 12 different places. You share it into one. And the ones that I recommend really quickly are places like Podbean, so that's Podbean, Audio Boom, as in audio and boom. You got Buzzsprout as well. Buzzsprout was really good as well. They're the platforms that I would recommend people going on to. Libsyn is also good, Libsyn. But Podbean is my preferred platform. I think it's quite good. And what you can do is you can upload files into there, and then you can then share it to all those different places. Now, how they share it is they create RSS feeds, which is basically a link between that podcast host and the platform itself. Now, Apple Podcasts are the one tricky little bit, because you need to actually put it into Apple Podcasts itself. You need to create the account to form that initial link, and then once you've got that initial link, then the podcast host will then go from there. But podcast host there's thousands out there. You just need to pick the right one for you, and each one does slightly different things. So have a look at them. See which one feels best for you, but that's how you get them onto the different platforms, by sharing it onto a podcast host. Right. We've got 3 minutes left, and I have got quite a few slides left. So what I want to do now is talk about the marketing side of having a podcast. Now, you want to use social media, you want to use your newsletters, you want to use every bit of available marketing time to talk about your podcast coming up, starting with preparing your audience for launch. So your social media campaign for your podcast should start well before you launch your podcast. It should start with you telling people that you're going to launch a podcast on a particular date. Then it should be sharing the actual art, the actual episode artwork. Then it should be sharing a few kind of backstage glimpses. It could be stills, it could be clips. You want to then be sharing maybe an episode list or a guest list that's coming up. All of this stuff will prepare your audience for the launch. When you got those links from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you want to then be sharing those as well. YouTube, exactly the same. You want to be sharing those as well. And then that way people can follow your platform podcast right from the start. But you don't want to be launching it at the same time as telling people the first time. People might miss the first message on social media. They might miss the first newsletter that you share out. But so by the time the podcast launches, you will have at least 4 or 5 touch points that you know that people have been told about your podcast in different ways. As I said, episode list, the episode artwork, the guests that are becoming known, the date of when it's going to be launched, the links to where people can follow. That's 5 straight away that I've just thought off the top of my head. Not including the clips that you can share beforehand. When you launch a podcast, you don't want it to be the first message to go out to be that main message. You want it to be the 5th or 6th or 7th or 8th or 20th message. The more message you can share, the more you can bring your customers and your audience along with the journey with you, the more successful it's going to be. And you use social media is ace for this. You can use clips, you can use pictures, you can use documents on LinkedIn. You can share so much on social media. And great thing about social media, 9 times out of 10, it's free. You don't have to pay for it. So therefore, you just need to create the content to share on it. On TikTok and Instagram, you can share your clips. On LinkedIn, hell, clips as well. You can share the whole stream if you want to by doing a LinkedIn Live based on it. You can share your episode, artwork. There's so much stuff you can share with social media. Honestly, I could do a whole marketing podcast marketing bit if you want me to. Actually, if you do want me to do a whole webinar about how to market your podcast, let me know in the comments. It will feature more in the other courses, but if you do want a whole particular webinar based on marketing, let me know and I'll put that in. On launch day, however, you want to make sure that everything is set up. You've got all your links all sorted. You know your podcast host will be sharing it at the same time because you've got it all set up. You know, and so all you want to do is just press a button, and you just want to make sure that actually you got everything all sorted. Don't expect fireworks because you probably won't get it. But what you can get is a small sizzle, and actually it will slowly increase. So don't expect it to go like that. It'll be more like that. You will get a spike in listeners on the first day. However, you want to share that podcast. You want to share those links in as many different places as you can. So on social media, it needs to be all over your social media in the places that your audience will get value from it. You want to place it in groups. You want to place it in as an article. You want to do you want to share it, posts all about it on the platforms that people do want to listen, that your audience is going to be there. So if it's TikTok, Instagram, put clips on there as well, but you want to put it on there. You want to put it on your website, put it on your emails, talk about it at meetings. You want to share those links as far and wide and get your community and your supporters to do the same. And by the way, I will be doing a marketing webinar at some point because I have got people saying that and they actually do want it. So yeah, I will put that into the diary and let you know when that will be. Afterwards, you want to keep sharing. You want to keep banging the drum and you want to keep talking about it, using social media as a tool to be able to do that. If you've got a newsletter, put it in the newsletter. Use that newsletter copy as the show notes. Put that newsletter copy into your LinkedIn as an article. Share it on there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you just want a nice strategy to be able to help you market your podcast. For instance, you could say for every podcast launch, I'll create a graphic, which I'll share with a guest. I'll create clips, which I'll also share with a guest so they can share it. I'll place those clips on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. I will put the show notes as a copy into my newsletter. I will create a LinkedIn article based on that, and I'll share it on social media on the dates released, and also every other day I'll share a different clip. If you do all that, bad boys, you will be ahead of 99% of people because they won't do that. They won't do all of that. But that's all in your gift to be able to do it. And all you need to do is create the content and then share it and schedule it in. Then what you can do is you can talk in the comments with people and you can refine the future content based on what they say. So if they do want more topics, more particular things about a particular topic, like I've just done here with a marketing bit, then you can put more of those in to your future things. So really use your post-launch strategy and create a strategy around it. Make sure that strategy fits in with what your business goals are or your marketing plan is. But make sure you have got a strategy for it. Even if it's just a basic, I'm going to share it in these 10 places, or I'm going to do 10 things after I've launched this podcast or launched an episode. Okay, folks, that is it. Wow, 33 minutes, and I have covered 12 different topics, 12 different parts about your podcast guide. So just to kind of quickly recap, I have covered crafting your idea, choosing your podcast format, naming your podcast, planning your first 12 episodes, design a podcast artwork, essential equipment, podcast editing, getting your podcasts on Spotify and other platforms, preparing your audience for podcast launch, utilizing social media, launch day checklist, and post-launch strategies. Whew, all done. So that's all done. So now it's time for your questions. So if you've got any questions for me, please put them into the comments. Let me know what questions you have. Please. I do see that the comments are filtering through from LinkedIn and YouTube as well. So if you have got any questions about launching your own podcast, please let me know. I am just going to take a quick drink for a second just to give my voice and my throat a little bit of a break. So bear with me just for a second. That's also another good tip, actually, is when you're thinking about your kind of background and what you need when you record it, make sure you have got a drink, because when you're talking, it doesn't matter if it's an interview or if it's going to be a solo podcast, you might need a drink because your throat might kind of close up. So please, if you do need a drink, take a drink. Also, if you've got an issue with and ahhing during interviews, just take a pause. All you're doing when you're saying an or an ah is giving your brain time to think about what you're going to say next. So a pause does exactly the same as an or an ah. It doesn't make any difference to you, really. But what you are doing to the audience is giving them time to absorb the last information. Because if I just keep saying and talking really, really fast, which I have done during this, if I wanted to make a real big point, I would just leave a big pause after what I've just said. It feels uncomfortable, but it gives you, the listener, the audience, time to then kind of slow down and actually catch that point. Okay, so we've got someone saying, has asked a question about editing. So I missed the editing part. Is there a specific software we can use for editing which is free? Right, okay. Now, if you're doing, so the best piece of free software that I've personally used, and all of the stuff that I recommend is through personal experience. The best one that I've used is a tool called Audacity, which is spelled Audacity. Now, Audacity is a free piece of software, which means you can edit the audio. I have not found any free video editing softwares out there that don't produce a watermark. So video editing, no, nothing free. But video for audio software, Audacity is fantastic. It's the industry standard. I've been using it for years, and it means that you can upload different things and you can put a start and the end and all that kind of stuff on there. It's what I recommend my clients or teams to use if they do want some basic editing done and they want to do it themselves. And it is free. You do need to update different libraries, which can take a bit of technical know-how to do. But once you've done that, you're free to go and you can put as many hours of content on there as possible. The trick with editing is that it shouldn't sound edited. That was the main thing with editing your podcast. You can take out the ums and the ahs, which are okay for audio, but when you come to video, taking out the ums and the ahs means you get a very drastic, you get a very kind of choppy video potentially. So that doesn't really work as much. That doesn't really translate well on video compared to audio. So what you want to do really is you want to make sure that your edited podcasts don't sound edited. That normally means taking a very light touch with editing if you want to edit at all. I know some podcasts don't edit at all, and that's absolutely fine. You might just want to adjust the volumes at all a little bit or take out some of the background noise, but actually sometimes you don't need that. So the main bit for the editing part was make sure it doesn't sound edited. That was the main thing. Okay, so what is achieved? So Steve's asked the question: what is realistically achievable in the first 90 days if I do this properly? I can't answer that because that evolves in so many different variables and factors. And it also depends on what kind of community you've got behind you to start off with. If you've got a tiny community, you need to build your community up at the same time as doing this. as launching a podcast. Now, all the tips that I've given you isn't really about growing your podcast. It's about launching your podcast. It's about getting it to the launch stage. But all of the tips I've given you throughout this will get you into the best position to launch your podcast in the best possible way and the simplest way, in my opinion. Now, if what's realistically achievable in the first 90 days does depend on how you market it. And that then becomes a marketing job rather than a process job, which this webinar was really about the process. In the first 90 days, if you've got a really, really good community behind you, which is really passionate, you could, again, it depends on what goals you want to set. You might be able to get sponsorship. You might be able to get 1,000 listeners per show. You might just be able to get 100. You might get 10. It depends on what, I can't answer this question because it involves too many variables. What I will be asking follow-up questions, Steve, just to let you know, is what type of community do you want? What goals do you want to set for your podcast? Which are, for some people, could be listeners, it could be viewers, it could be, to sell different products, it could be sponsorship. What goals are you literally going to be doing? I can't answer this because I don't have enough information. But please, if you give me the information, I will literally let you know. Realistically, though, you in the first 90 days, you should be well within you should feel comfortable with your podcast. It also depends on how often you're releasing episodes. Because if you in the first 90 days, if you release one a month, one a week, then you're going to have a different level of experience than doing one in that 90 days. So it depends on what frequency you're ending at. I can't answer that question, but I would love to have more information from you to find out more from you. In my mind, though, in the first 90 days, if you've applied yourself and you are actually working on it consistently most days, podcasting should be part of your strategy. You should be in a more comfortable state. Your processes should be sharpened down, and you should be in a much better place to be able to give value to yourself, your business, and your community. Tangible, those are what I can definitely say you will be doing in the first 90 days. Sorry if I haven't answered that question, but actually it's quite a tricky question. Thank you for asking it. Okay, this little bit is all about sponsorship. So can you earn a living from a podcast? Is it through sponsorship, or do they have a main act as an add-on for your merch? Hope that makes sense. It does. And the truth is that to make a living from a podcast, you need to have a proper successful podcast. Most people will do it and use a podcast to either give value to their community or highlight products which are already existing in their business, such as books, events. Sponsorship is only one way of earning money from your podcast. You can if you sponsor a podcast, you can earn sponsorship from reading out ads or different places, have logos on graphics, etc. like that. So sponsorship is one way. You can also tag different products, or not even tag them, but mention different products throughout the show or the start or the end. That could be books, that could be courses, that could be private groups, masterminds, all that kind of stuff. That's where most people will gain money from. So they'll use a podcast as a support to their main business. The people who tend to earn a living from podcasts normally have a big team around them. They have investment. They have people who are just purely doing social media stuff. They've got people doing the editing stuff. The host will be the public side of it. They might already have a massive following, or not even a massive following, and following is just really niche to their particular audience. They're the kind of people who will earn a living through podcasts. You can earn a living through podcasts as well from being a producer, being being a supporter of a show. Might have affiliate links for different products. You might do that. But I would say it's more of an add-on rather than learn it as a main living. However, you can earn a living through podcasting. And I make a living through podcasting, but I don't earn a living through having a podcast, but through the services I have that support podcasts. That's how I make a living. So yes, you can make a living, but it's hard. But most people will do it through different products that they sell throughout the podcasts. Hope that makes sense to you. And if not, then you can more than happy to give me more information. Just to give you a heads up, the marketing webinar I will do as a separate email, a separate podcast, webinar, and I'll probably do that next month, where I'll go through maybe 20 things to do about maybe 20 to 25 things how to market a podcast. And I'll do that as a separate webinar, and I'll do that next month at some point in time. So I will definitely do that. Now, I'm just going to check LinkedIn as well to see if there's any other comments as well. Let's just have a little look. But please, if you have any comments, or if there's any sections you want me to repeat, please let me know in the comments, because I'm more than happy to go back and review any different images, any different slides or anything like that. Or if there's anything else you want me to cover in this about launching a podcast, please let me know. Please let me know. Now, I'm just having a look on here. Okay. Also, if you're watching on the replay, by the way, please ask your questions, because I will still pick them up. I will do. There's no other comments at the moment on LinkedIn. There's no other comments on Facebook or on StreamYard, which is all good. Now, what happens if I press that button? Oh, I get it just there. That's really cool. Okay. So if no one's got any more questions, I am going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us today. If any other questions come in just while I'm doing this last bit, then I will obviously do it. But I just want to say thank you very much for joining us today. There are other courses available in this kind of podcasting toolkit. Now, I've covered 12 of 40 units, pretty much. I've covered 12 out of 40 units, which on a course called the Podcast Launch Guide. Now, you can check this out on Udemy. So if you do want to learn more about how to launch podcasting in more details, check that course out on Udemy. There's also a course about being a standout guest. Also, if you're a children's provider, then you can, children's activity provider even, then there's a course particularly for you. And there's a free course, which is the Beginner's Guide to Podcasting, which you can start, which will go through the 5 different ways of how you can engage with podcasts. So they're all available on Udemy at the moment. And I've also got a course available. I've got courses launching this year, which is all about being podcasting for authors on May the 4th. On July 6th, we're launching How to Keep Your Podcast Alive and Thriving. And in November the 2nd, we've got one all around shopping centres of how they can make the most of podcasts. As I believe that is a big opportunity for them to use their spaces to be able to communicate their audience's journeys. So we've got all that stuff coming up. I have got one more question that has come up, which I do want to share just for a second. And that is, how can I start a podcast as a teen? And I will say, if you're a teen and you want to start it, then I would work on the idea first. Your age is only going to be an advantage, because technology-wise, you're going to be you're going to be more familiar with the technology than other people. So I would say start with figuring out what the idea is, what you want to start sharing with people. And then start talking about it on your social. Start, asking your community on TikTok and Instagram what topics they want to see. And then start building the ideas from there. And then by the time you've launched, because you've involved you've crafted your idea, and because you've asked your community all around it, please let me know what you want to share, what you want me to share in the podcast. Then actually, you're going to be in a much better position when you launch it, because you've brought them along the way, and also you've really kind of done that. But you can use social media in a completely different way, potentially, to what I could, because you're more native to it. So I would say start using that to craft the idea, and use that as a more functional bit rather than just a promotional tool. That's how I would start it. But really, if you do want more information about that, let me know. And please, for anyone who wants to subscribe to my newsletter, There are so many different articles in my new LinkedIn newsletter, which is all about that. If you want me to start every day when I produce the newsletter, start putting it onto TikTok and Instagram as a story so you can see it, let me know and I will do that for you. That's absolutely fine because I want to give you the information that you want to do. That's going to help you along your podcasting journey. But I think I'm pretty much done now. Thank you very much for everyone starting. Well, thank you for everyone who's been watching. I'm going to just close that comment now. If you do want any more information, please let me know. And if you are watching on the replay, please keep asking any questions, and I will, when I get a notification that you've commented, I will then answer your question in the comment section. If you want me to start doing a newsletter but on LinkedIn or on Instagram or TikTok as video, let me know as well. And please watch out for a marketing webinar coming up in May. The date will be available very shortly, and I will advertise that as a LinkedIn event, also on StreamYard and Eventbrite as well. Take care, my friends. See you all soon, and thank you very much for joining me today. Take care.